Hello, dear listeners. My name is Sarah Martinez, and I am very grateful to you for being here with me today. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this story. It is very important to me to share it with you, even though it is one of the most difficult stories I have ever had to tell. Before we begin, if this story touches your heart the way it touched mine, please consider subscribing to our channel. Your support helps me continue to share these important stories of resilience and hope. This is the story of my grandmother, Eleanor May Patterson, and I have carried it in my heart my entire life. It is a story of pain and survival, of darkness and light, and ultimately of the incredible power of the human spirit. Eleanor May Patterson was born on March 15, 1923, in the small, dusty town of Cedar Ridge, Texas, with a population of just over 800 people. She was the third child of William and Martha Patterson and had two older brothers, Thomas and James, who were 8 and 10 years old at the time of her birth. The timing of her birth could not have been worse. It was the Great Depression, and the Patterson family was struggling to make ends meet. Her father, William, worked at a local grain mill when there was work, but such days were becoming increasingly rare. Her mother, Martha, took on laundry and mending for several families in town who could still afford such a luxury. From the moment Eleanor learned to walk at the age of just 10 months, she was expected to help out however she could, sorting buttons, carrying water, and later, when she was only 3, looking after the neighbors' children while their parents worked. The psychological impact of such an environment cannot be underestimated. Eleanor realized early on that her value depended on her usefulness, and this belief accompanied her throughout her life. She developed what psychologists now call hypervigilance, a constant analysis of her environment in search of threats or needs she could satisfy. This survival mechanism, which protected her in childhood, later created problems in forming healthy relationships. When Eleanor started school in September 1929, at the age of 6, she was already different from other children. Her clothes were patched and faded, her shoes had holes that she tried to hide by carefully placing her feet, and she often came to school hungry because there was not enough food at home. But it wasn't just poverty that made her a target. Other children thought she was strange because of her quiet, wary nature. The bullying began almost immediately. Mary Henderson, the banker's daughter, would announce loudly when Eleanor entered the classroom, "Here comes the ghost, she never talks." The other children laughed and whispered, calling her a scarecrow because of her thinness and worn clothes. During recess, they played games that deliberately excluded her, forming a circle and singing songs about poor little Eleanor, whom nobody loves. The worst incident occurred in the spring of 1933, when Eleanor was 10 years old. A group of girls, led by Mary Henderson, cornered her in the schoolyard and cut off her long, beautiful brown hair, the only thing she was proud of in her appearance. They left her there crying, with tufts of hair scattered around her feet. When she came home that day, her mother looked at her and simply said, "Your hair will grow back, Eleanor. Tears don't solve problems." From a psychological standpoint, these experiences of chronic bullying left deep scars on Eleanor's developing self-esteem. She internalized the belief that she was inferior to others and developed a response to the trauma that included emotional numbness and social isolation. Surprisingly, however, she also began to develop an inner strength, a determination to prove her worth through kindness and hard work. The summer of 1941 changed Eleanor's life forever. She had just turned 18 in March, and for the first time in her life, she began to look to the future with hope. She graduated from high school, one of only 3 girls in her class, and received a job offer at a local department store. For the first time, she could imagine a life beyond the suffocating walls of her parents' home. On a stifling July evening, July 23, 1941, her world collapsed. Her parents had gone to a neighboring town to visit Martha's sister, leaving Eleanor alone with her brothers Thomas, 29, and James, 31. Both brothers drank heavily, a habit that had worsened since they were unable to find steady work. Eleanor never spoke in detail about what happened that night, not even to me, her daughter. But over the years, I pieced together a picture from snippets of conversation, from her nightmares, and from the way she froze when someone approached her from behind. Thomas and James, her own brothers, who were supposed to protect her, violated that sacred trust in the most horrific way. They both raped her, taking turns while the other held her down. They told her that if she ever told anyone, they would tell everyone in town that she had seduced them, that she was a whore who couldn't be trusted. In 1941, in a small Texas town, such an accusation would have completely destroyed her life. The psychological trauma of this betrayal cannot be overstated. Eleanor was not only faced with sexual abuse, she was faced with the complete destruction of her ability to trust, especially men, and especially her family. The shame and self-blame that followed haunted her for decades. She developed what we now call complex post-traumatic stress disorder, with symptoms such as dissociation, severe anxiety, and a deep sense of fundamental worthlessness. After the attack, Eleanor was faced with an impossible choice. Her deeply ingrained sense of family duty told her she should remain silent, continue living at home, and pretend nothing had happened. This was what was expected of women in her time in society, to endure, sacrifice themselves, and put the reputation of their family above their own well-being. But another part of her, a growing voice of self-preservation, urged her to leave, to get a job at a department store, save up money, and run away somewhere, anywhere. This internal conflict tore her apart for months. She lay awake at night, two voices swirling in her head. You owe your family, your parents who sacrificed themselves for you. And you deserve better. You deserve safety. The turning point came on a cold November morning in 1941. She was hanging laundry behind the house when she heard Thomas say to James, "She's been acting strange lately. Maybe it's time to remind her of her place." The implication was clear, and Eleanor knew she would not survive another attack. That same day, she walked into Patterson's and took the job she had been offered months earlier. She moved into a tiny room above the store and paid the rent out of her meager salary. When her parents asked her why she had left home, she simply replied, "Now I have to make my own way in life." She never told them why. Eleanor's greatest fear, born on that terrible night and during her childhood abuse, was that she was fundamentally unworthy of love and security. Deep down, she believed that she attracted violence and rejection because there was something wrong with her. This fear manifested itself in her relationships throughout her 20s. She entered into relationships with men who were emotionally unavailable, or worse, unconsciously reminded her of her brothers. She sabotaged potential friendships with women, convinced that they would eventually see her flaws and abandon her. The moment that changed everything came on April 12, 1947, when Eleanor was 24 years old. She was working in a department store when a traveling salesman named Robert Chen walked in. Robert was different from the other men she knew. He was gentle, patient, and seemed to truly see her as a person, not just a pretty face or an object to be conquered. But when Robert asked her out to dinner, Eleanor immediately wanted to say no. Her fear whispered familiar words. "He'll hurt you. He'll leave you. You're not good enough for him." But something in his eyes, a kindness she hadn't seen since her childhood teacher, Miss Williams, made her hesitate. Instead of refusing right away, Eleanor asked, "Why do you want to have dinner with me?" Robert's answer changed her life. "Because in the few minutes I've talked to you, I've seen that you're kind, intelligent, and strong, and I'd like to get to know the person behind those beautiful, sad eyes." That evening, for the first time in her adult life, Eleanor decided to face her fears. She had dinner with Robert, and although she was scared to death the whole evening, she began to see herself through his eyes, as a person worthy of kindness and respect. The turning point in Eleanor's life came 6 months later, on October 8, 1947. She and Robert had been quietly courting each other, and he asked her to marry him. Eleanor was torn between her growing love for this gentle man and her deep conviction that she was too damaged to be anyone's wife. That evening, she sat alone in her small room above the general store, holding Robert's letter proposing marriage. When she read his words, "Eleanor, you are the strongest and most beautiful soul I have ever met. Whatever shadows from your past haunt you, they have only made you more compassionate and dear to me." Something changed in her. For the first time, Eleanor began to understand that her suffering had not diminished her value. It had revealed her incredible strength. She had survived poverty, abuse, and betrayal. She had chosen courage over comfort when she left her parents' home. She had built a life for herself through determination and hard work. Psychologists call this realization a moment of post-traumatic growth, when people who have experienced trauma begin to understand that their terrible experiences have also contributed to their resilience and capacity for empathy. Eleanor began to reinterpret her story, not as one of victimhood, but as one of survival and strength. On December 20, 1947, Eleanor married Robert Chen in a small ceremony at a city church. It was a scandal in Cedar Ridge, not only because she was marrying someone from a different social class — Robert was a successful businessman — but also because he was Chinese American at a time when interracial marriage was highly controversial in Texas. But Eleanor learned to care less about what other people thought and more about what she knew in her heart. Robert was kind, patient, and saw her as the strong woman she had become, not the broken girl she had been. Their marriage wasn't perfect. Eleanor still suffered from nightmares and panic attacks when Robert moved too quickly or spoke too loudly, but Robert was patient, and Eleanor was determined to heal. Together, they moved to San Antonio, where Robert's business was expanding, giving Eleanor the opportunity to start life with a clean slate. Their first daughter, my mother, Margaret, was born on September 3, 1949. Eleanor was 26 years old and afraid of becoming a mother. She had not seen good examples of motherhood in her own childhood. But she was determined to give her daughter everything she had never had: security, unconditional love, and the freedom to be herself. Eleanor lived to be 89 and died peacefully on January 2, 2012. In those 89 years, she raised 3 children, helped Robert build a successful business, and became a pillar of her community. She volunteered at a local women's shelter, though she never spoke publicly about why that cause was so important to her. What strikes me most about my grandmother's story is not that she survived, but how she turned her pain into purpose. She couldn't save herself from the trauma of her youth, but she dedicated the rest of her life to ensuring that other women and children received the support and protection she never had. Eleanor never spoke directly about the abuse she suffered at the hands of her brothers, but I understood from her actions and her work what shaped her character. She taught me that survival is not just endurance, but the ability to choose to believe in your worth over and over again, even when others make you feel worthless. Her story reminds us that healing is not about forgetting or forgiving those who hurt us, but about refusing to let their actions define our worth or limit our ability to love and find joy. As I conclude the story of my grandmother, I am amazed at how much courage it took her to build a full and happy life after such a difficult start. Eleanor May Patterson Chen was proof that we are not defined by what happens to us, but by how we respond to it. Her story is a testament to the incredible strength of the human spirit and the ability to choose hope over despair, love over fear, and purpose over pain. Thank you so much for listening to this story. It means a lot to me to share my grandmother's legacy with you. If this story touched you, please write in the comments where you heard it. I love hearing from listeners around the world. Your support and participation help me continue to share these important stories of survival and resilience. Until next time, remember the words Eleanor said to me: "Strength isn't about never falling down, dear. Strength is about getting up every time, no matter how hard it is."